There is a particular kind of moment that arrives without invitation. This is a real story. A woman walking along a river on an ordinary morning, boats in the marina, ducks on the water, people passing by. The familiar noise of a city going about its day. Her mind was elsewhere, absorbed in something she was listening to. Some spiritual talk, somewhat profound, not particularly looking for anything at all. And then something shifted, a felt sense, as though for one moment the surface of everything became briefly transparent. And underneath the boats, the ducks, the people, her own body, moving through it all, she sensed one substance, one field, a oneness, everything arising from the same source, everything made of the same fundamental vibrating aliveness. And in that moment, she could see both things simultaneously. Herself as herself, and herself as not herself. Simply one grouping of the same vast thing that the duck was, the water was, the city was. And underneath that seeing, an of course moment. A recognition so simple, it almost embarrassed her. Of course. How had she never seen this before? And then a flash of fear creeping in, a sudden anxiety that moved through the whole body, a panic, and the vision closed. The ordinary world reassembled itself. The boats were the boats again, the ducks were ducks, the city was a city. But something remained. The vision had gone. The of course had not. Now, the fear that arrived in that moment, that sudden anxiety that closed the vision, this too the ancient teachers understood very well. When the contracted self senses its own permeability, its own participation in something vastly larger than its usual story about itself, the part of us whose entire function is to maintain the sense of being a separate someone experiences this as disillusion. And disillusion, even beautiful disillusion, registers as danger. The boundary reasserts itself. The vision closes, which means the experience was real enough to actually threaten the sense of separation. And that is not nothing. The ancient teachers had two words for what happened on that riverbank. The first, Sphurana, from the Sanskrit root sphur, meaning to flash, to suddenly burst into light. Awareness flashing in its own knowing, arriving without being constructed, without being sought, often while the mind is occupied with something else entirely, and the mind cannot take credit for what appeared. The second word, Pratibhā, sudden illumination, a direct knowing, more immediate than thought. Both words point at the same movement. Awareness recognizing itself in what it is looking at. And here is what the tradition understood that most teachings miss. This is not the destination. It is the first breadcrumb. Before this moment, awakening was a concept, something read, heard, described about, filed away as an interesting idea, and slightly out of reach. But after this moment, it is something known and reachable, because she had briefly stood inside it. And that changes everything. She is no longer searching for something she has never touched. My, the impossible just became possible. She is finding her way back to something she briefly was. The vision closes, the seer remains, unchanged in its nature, changed in its knowing. The boats are still there, the river still flows, the city carries on, as though nothing has changed. And perhaps nothing has changed, except this. Once awareness has recognized itself, even for a single breath, life is never again quite as ordinary. And beneath the changing, the same shimmering aliveness that once revealed itself for a single breath now lives in her as a quiet certainty. The flash has passed, yet the wonder remains.